All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. This is an interesting meeting. Typically the types of topics that we usually talk about are generally the web domain, Node.js, building web applications, and there's been a number of people I've run into locally here in Jacksonville that have had an interest in mobile development or are doing mobile development full time. And I figured one of the things that I kind of been hoping that we'd be able to do more of is to do more presentations related around mobile development. As I was just discussing earlier for the people who might have just joined online, there's not a lot of companies in Jacksonville that are doing mobile development, but the ones that are seem to be located out at the beach for whatever reason. So when I was working full time doing mobile development, I was based out of the beach. So if we can if there's more interest in mobile topics or whatever, we'll probably do more. But I wanted to kind of get a gauge just to see like what kind of interest there was in doing mobile development. And basically, what I'm finding is that whenever we do a subject where we're talking about like AI and AI development stuff like that, we get like a ton of people for doing one on like how to get a job right now. We get a ton of people and stuff for that. So I wanted to kind of get a gauge of that. So then we'll probably like continue doing web type topics as well as AI type of topics, as those seem to be in demand. So that being said, this user group is always looking for speakers. I'm always impressed by like the Python user group here in Jacksonville because they always seem to have like a lineup of like speakers for like the next 6 months. It's like we're lucky if I can get like one lined up, for the next month. So if you're interested in doing a presentation or you know anybody that's interested in doing a presentation, please, feel free to hit me up and I can get you on the schedule. Speaking of which, we this year we've been meeting on Tuesdays, and that's not normally when we meet. We generally have met either on like Wednesdays or Thursdays because Tuesday just seems to be like the most popular night of the week for user group meetings for whatever reason. And so I've always avoided doing it on Tuesday nights, but I have been doing a boot camp at nights, and the only night I have off during the week is on Tuesdays. But that boot camp is ending next month. And so after this month, I plan on moving the meetings to either a Wednesday or Thursday. I'm going to talk with Interactive Resources about when is the most like convenient time for doing that. I generally try to book the meetings out about like a month out, so there's not like a surprise of when the next meeting's going to be. So yeah, for right now, this month is probably the last month we'll be meeting on Tuesday, and then after this, we'll either be meeting on Wednesday or Thursday. So stay tuned. All right. So quick, a little bit about me. I'm the manager, co-manager of the user group. I'm a former mobile engineer and architect. So that's what I did starting about 10 years ago. I moved to doing mobile development like full time. Um, and then I was lucky to have um, two really good jobs and then one really bad one doing mobile development. And the first one, I worked for a company here in town called Swift Technology, and we actually built like a secure CRM solution for companies that had like strong compliance requirements. So, for instance, if you're working for like a life sciences type company or financial institution, they generally have strict requirements when it comes to employees using, their data on a mobile app. And so we had a secure client that I did at that company. And then after that company kind of went under, I went and worked for a Silicon Valley-based company in 2022 called Bill.com. And I worked there for almost 2 years as a staff engineer. And I got to do some neat stuff. It was a neat job because I work primarily on iOS, but I also did some work with the React Native team as well. And I built out their CI/CD platform that they use for all their continuous integration. That being said, I have experience with a lot of different other technologies. So this user group is obviously it's a Node.js web type of user group. So I've got a fair amount of experience doing JavaScript, TypeScript, React. I've also worked as a .NET developer, so a fair amount of experience with C Sharp, some Visual Basic .NET, but don't tell anybody. And then on the mobile side, I've worked with Swift, Objective-C, Kotlin, Java. And more recently, I've been doing some stuff with Python because I'm getting more into AI and doing AI engineering. And then a lot of experience with SQL. So I blog about this stuff. I've been kind of like, I haven't done a lot of posts in the last couple of months because I've been doing this boot camp at night. But I plan on starting back on that again. But I mainly blog about this kind of stuff. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which I also have not done a lot of posts lately. It's called the Polyglot Engineer. And I also have a GitHub page where I'll post examples and stuff that I do in these presentations. And then I also have two handles I use online. One's the JaxNode for the JaxNode user group, and one Polyglot Engine 1 that I have on X. So we're going to be talking about building for mobile tonight. So why build software for mobile applications? And the main reason is like you're going to get the most number of eyeballs possible for your applications if you're building for mobile. So the statistic I've heard is that there's several hundred million devices, or basically desktop devices, like this Macintosh or Windows laptop, that sort of thing. But there are billions of mobile users. And I don't have the current stats, but at one point, I think there's something close to over half the people on the planet have a mobile device, some type of smartphone that they use. Another thing is that mobile users have their phones 24/7. So, there may be, some type of application needs where you need people to be able to interact with your data or provide updates on a 24/7 basis. The other thing that's nice about mobile phones is they have sensors that you don't have in desktop. So one of the things that I think is kind of like a good example of, companies that would not exist today are companies like Uber and Grubhub. Because your mobile phone has a GPS receiver in it, it knows your exact location. And so those are companies that would not exist without a smartphone. So those are some of the reasons you want to be able to target mobile. This is one of my favorite quotes. This is from a manager I had named Calvin Ward, and the quote here is, "There's not a single problem in software engineering that can't be solved with an additional layer of abstraction." And I always got a kick out of that. And there's some truth to that. There's also some scary, horrible things about that as well. But the key thing here is, oops, let me go back. I'm just trying it. I'll forget about it right now. So when you're building for mobile, there's a lot of different ways for building for mobile. You can, of course, just make sure that your web applications work correctly on a web browser that's a mobile web browser. There's also a framework called Cordova, which lets you use HTML, CSS, and JavaScript through a web view for building applications, which also lets you kind of create a application that you can also push up to the stores. You can also just build natively for the devices. So both Google and Apple, both have tooling, IDEs, and everything for building native applications. The framework that I probably use the most right now that's a cross-platform framework is React Native. There's also Flutter, which is Charlie's going to be talking about tonight. there's a huge .NET community here in Jacksonville, and so one of the things that all of my .NET brethren like to tell me is like, hey, you can just use .NET for building your mobile applications, and that's true because they do have a cross-platform framework called .NET MAUI, and that is based off of the old Xamarin tool set that Microsoft bought for doing mobile development. And there's actually a lot more that I'm not mentioning here tonight, but these are the big ones. So how do I put my app on the App Store? So unfortunately, most of the phone operating systems are a walled garden. There's been some legal changes with that recently, like in Europe. There's I think a settlement that was made in Europe that involved, I think, Epic Games, where they have to be able to do a third-party store for being able to load apps onto the phone. But for the most part, you're going to need to get approval from either Apple or Google to be able to put your apps up onto those stores. And so essentially what happens there is that you'll build your application, and then what you do is you submit it to the store, and there is a review process that goes on. And approvals are usually done like within 24 hours. Apple had like a really bad reputation for a long time because sometimes it could take 2 or 3 weeks to get a approval. But I'd say probably about 10 years ago, they got that down to generally somewhere between 24 and 48 hours to get your app approved. So that's gotten a lot better. And while their time has come down, like Google was, had a reputation for doing things like really quickly, and then that started to slow down. So now they're probably about the same. I've had apps that I've pushed up an iOS and Android version. I've had Apple like approve it faster than Google. It's generally not the case, but that's been my experience. And I already talked about the alternative stores in the EU. As far as that goes, I would say it's probably best to try to stay within those walled gardens because like Apple, for example, they're going to make it very difficult for you. Like once you're on those stores, you've opted out of the Apple ecosystem, as an example. They're really, really angry about some of those court decisions and the EU decisions. So my suggestion is just don't poke the bear and try to use the kind of like the standards and stuff like that. As far as like making sure you're abiding by all the rules and stuff like that, they do a pretty good job of like publishing what the rules are as far as what they allow, what they don't allow. Some of it is obvious, but there's also stuff where it's like you kind of have to look into like some of the details. Stuff you can get in trouble for is like specifically like if you're trying to go outside of like let's say their payment system as an example. So there's something that's sometimes referred to as the Apple tax. Google does the same thing where if you're purchasing like a subscription to something, and that's the way a lot of people want to be able to do their apps. They want people to subscribe to it as a service. A lot of times what will happen is I have to admit somebody here. Okay, escape. I always forget how to do this. F. Oh, there we go. Bear with me right here while I add this gentleman. Where'd he go? Here we go. Again. There's somebody trying to get in. I don't know where they went. Anyways, I'll just do this like this. All right, so let's go back. Oops. Wrong thing. What's that? All right. So this is something I would like to refer to as David Fekke's law. I'm David Fekke, by the way. If you're a web developer, you're a mobile developer by definition. And the reason why I say this is because when I was still, I'm currently actually doing web development, but when I was doing web development before being a full-time mobile developer, I started looking at the stats of, who was accessing our publicly facing websites. And even like back like around 2012 as an example, one of the things I was noticing was that there was a fairly large percentage of users that were accessing either through like an iPad or iPhone or Android phone. So look at your web statistics because you might be actually surprised by how many people are, even your application's designed to be a desktop application. There probably are mobile users that are trying to access your application. So that being said, I want to have a slide in here to talk about mobile first. And so, most web apps today, I hope that anybody that's building like a brand new web app today is designing it with mobile as part of that. And so a lot of the like styles and layouts in your app need to take mobile and tablet sizes into account. There's media queries you can use in your CSS to make sure that things will flow and lay out correctly on a mobile device. And sometimes it's not that difficult. You can take like an existing web application and just a couple quick changes or whatever, like maybe getting rid of some areas and stuff that don't need to be there, like marginal areas and stuff like that. You can eliminate it and make the application a lot more usable for mobile. And also, when you're deploying to the web, you're also bypassing the OS gatekeepers. So, for instance, like Google and Apple and stuff like that. The original idea that Steve Jobs had for the iPhone is that he didn't want people developing natively for the iPhone. He just wanted people using HTML5. I don't know if people remember that or not. He's been gone for about 15 years now, but that was one of the original ideas. And you could actually take your mobile web application and create an app icon for it on your phone. So that's something also to take into account is that if you take people like my mom as an example, like my mom, like you try to get her to install a new app onto her phone, it's asking me for my Apple ID password. I don't know what my Apple ID password is. And so it's like, for some people, the only way they're going to be able to access your application may be through the web. Or they may not have a credit card or something like that. Which brings us to Cordova. And like I was saying before, sometimes this is referred to as essentially like a app wrapper around a web view. Which essentially is what it is. But the same idea here is you build your applications with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then you basically create a executable with that bundled up inside, and you can submit those to the app stores. They have plugins you can use with Cordova. So if you have like certain native functionality you need people to use, you can actually bundle those into the application. But at the end of the day, this is just a wrapper for either the web view in Android or the WK web view in iOS. Just a quick show of hands. Do people here know how many web views there are for iOS?
Like WebKit.
So there were three. I think one has been fully deprecated. So there was the UI web view, there's the WK web view, which is the one that Apple wants everybody to use. And then there's the SF web view, which is the Safari web view. The WK web view is what's actually used in Cordova for building applications. So the negatives here is that one of the problems that you can run into when you try to take a web app and make it a native app is that it doesn't quite look like a native app. There's a effect called uncanny valley where users kind of expect like certain things like buttons to look a certain way and for screens to look a certain way, and then for little navigation like back buttons and stuff like that to look a certain way. And so you can paint yourself into a corner pretty quick when you use Cordova, because it's just a web app that's wrapped inside of a wrapper. All right, React Native. So this is one I actually use on a regular basis. This is a native framework. It's not a web framework, so it's not a wrapper. The business logic essentially is all executed inside of a JavaScript engine called Hermes. There what used to be called JavaScript Bridge, but this has been replaced with what they call the new architecture. But the idea here is that you write your business logic and TypeScript, JavaScript, and then that controls the native UI elements inside of the web application. So what the user is seeing is a native application, but all the business logic essentially is executed is actually running JavaScript. Some of the benefits from using this is that since it's React based, you have the benefit of hot reloading. So one of the things that's nice about React is that you can make changes as you're developing and see those updates in real time. Most of the native functionality is exposed through a framework called Expo. And Expo is like a whole company and service that's set up outside of Meta. So those who don't know, Meta/Facebook, the inventor of React, is also like one of the main sponsors for React Native. But Expo is a company that started off. They make a kind of like a test application where you can load your React Native bundle into the Expo app. But more importantly, you can take that and you can build like your own native application that can then be deployed to the different stores. There's a feature I like a lot. I'm not sure what the status is, but it's called Code Push. And what's nice about Code Push is that you can build your native application, push it up to the stores. But let's say you have like maybe a small update where you need something changed, but you want to have to deploy the whole app. One of the things you can do is you can bundle up, create essentially a JavaScript bundle, and then push it out to all the users. And you can have code that runs inside of your application that will check to see if there's been an update to the bundle. There's a service that Microsoft used to offer. They've since shut it down that provided code push. I don't know how it's being done now, but that's a cool feature of React Native. I don't want to get too deep into Flutter because Charlie's going to be doing a whole presentation on this. But this is similar to React Native in the sense that you are building a native application that is cross-platform. And there are some key differences between React Native and Flutter. One of them is that Flutter kind of started off as something that used Canvas for displaying everything inside of it. So I think if you're familiar with the Canvas and HTML as an example, that's the same premise. But they do have like native UI things that you can use in there as well. I don't know if Charles is going to be getting into this or not, but one of the things that somebody's trying to join. Admit. There we go. All right. Go back. Here we go. So one of the things I'm not really sure what the status of this project is. It's still currently being supported by Google. Google, like a lot of the other Silicon Valley-based companies, there's been like a lot of layoffs, and some of it has been like a lot of these companies are trying to refocus on AI and doing AI-related stuff. And so I know there's been a lot of layoffs of Flutter engineers at Google. I'm not really sure what the status is, but it's still an active project. And like I said, I don't want to get too deep into that because I know Charlie's going to be talking about that tonight. As I mentioned before, there's also one from a framework called .NET MAUI, and this is another cross-platform framework. The main advantage here is that this is a framework that is, you're using .NET to build your application. So if you're already familiar with C# or F# or one of the .NET languages, you can use this to build your applications. So like I was saying before, it's like if you already are at a company, it's a .NET shop, like the company I work at now is a .NET shop. It's like this may be a solution for that. This originally started off as the Mono project. And And so it has open source roots. And Microsoft acquired Xamarin, made it part of their whole family of .NET products, and uh, and so it's now they have .NET MAUI, but there's some they used to have like a tool just for the Macintosh that was called I think they just called it Visual Studio for the Mac, and Microsoft has since killed it. There's a lot of tools that Microsoft makes that Microsoft just kills. So I think it's unfortunately because of that, the tooling and stuff like that, .NET's kind of it runs fine on Unix and Linux, but the tooling for developers, I think they're still pushing people towards using Visual Studio. And that brings us to native. So if you're going to be developing a lot of software or working inside of the Apple ecosystem, so to speak, iOS and iPadOS, Apple has a really outstanding tooling for building native applications. They started doing this with iPhone OS 2.0 back in 2008, I think. So the original like tooling and everything for building iOS applications was based off of Objective-C, which has its roots in Next Step OS. And for people who don't remember or don't know, Next was the company that Steve Jobs founded when he was booted out of Apple, and so they developed a Unix operating system and a lot of tooling, all built around Objective-C at Next. And so when Apple acquired Next in the 1990s, they adopted a lot of the operating system became Mac OS 10, and then eventually iOS and iPadOS and tvOS and Vision OS. And so a lot of the frameworks and stuff that you use when you're building native for iOS are based off of these kind of roots. There's been a lot of refactoring since Swift was introduced in 2014. Swift is a much more modern programming language. Objective-C has its roots in C, and so you have like header files and implementation files and all the stuff you'd expect if you're doing C or C++ development. Swift is a lot simpler. You can just create one file, and then everything is kind of handled by the compiler. They do some other things that are kind of neat. They have memory management. It's actually built into the compiler, so you don't have to do manual memory management like you'd have to do if you're building like a C or C++ application. They've also got pretty good concurrency also baked into it. And prior to Swift concurrency, they had something called Grand Central Dispatch that you could use for doing things concurrently. And then in 2019, Apple introduced Swift UI. And so if you're already familiar with building things with React, which is a component-based system, Swift UI added this capability. Now you could use a very similar framework. It works very similar to the way that React does. They even have like their own version of hot reloading, but it doesn't work as well as React does. But the key thing is you can build component-based MVVM type of applications using Swift with Swift UI. And you can also run C, C++, Objective-C, and Objective-C++ in your applications. So in order to, actually to be able to deploy apps, it doesn't matter if you're using Cordova or Flutter or whatever, if you want to be able to push apps up onto the Apple App Store, you have to have an Apple developer account. I put $100 here, but I think it's like $99 a year. The cool thing about it is that you can build for any of the Apple devices. So if you want to build something for the Vision OS, you want to build something for iPad, you name it, that one account will grant you access to Apple's whole ecosystem of billions of devices. The primary IDE is an IDE called Xcode. And there's also an Xcode toolchain, which includes things like Clang, the Swift compiler, all this other stuff for building out your applications. They have like a really awesome simulator app that you can also use, so you can test. So that's the other thing that's cool is that even if you do not have a developer account and you want to, let's say, you have an idea, you want to kind of build an app and see what it looks like. Uh, you can actually just boot it up and run it inside of the simulator. It doesn't have all of the features that you'd have if you were testing on an actual device, but it gives you most of them. And then they've got tools in there for doing performance monitoring. There's a lot of AI, machine learning stuff that's also baked into their tooling as well. On the Android side, there's also, this is a very similar story to what Apple has. You do have to have a Google account in order to be able to push up to the store, but I think they only charge $25 to get up on that, so they're a little bit more cost effective. Android actually started off as being an OS, like it was like a sidekick like device, and like the original prototypes they had mechanical keyboards like a BlackBerry as an example, and so they've had to go in and change a lot of things in the operating system to make it work and act like a modern like smartphone. So the original language that you use for buildings for Android was Java, and it's still kind of like a JVM based type of solution for the most part. The operating system is actually based off of Linux, but it's missing some of the key features that we're used to in Linux, like POSIX compatibility, and that'd be a problem for some people. And the internals for Android on most devices is just it's like a dumpster fire. It's a hot mess. But if you can get around that, a lot of the tooling, a lot of the frameworks that are provided are actually quite good. And then I'm gonna say maybe around 2017 or so, not too long after Apple had introduced Swift, uh, Google introduced Kotlin as kind of like the new modern language. It shares some features, not a lot, but some features with Swift. But it's also modern programming language. Um, you can use Jetpack Compose for adding like your own component-based UI similar to Swift UI on the Mac or React. And then your Android apps could be built and run as native apps. So the tooling, there's a IDE called Android Studio, which is actually based off of the JetBrains line of IDEs. It's pretty good. It includes JDK with it, and then you can build your .aab and your .apk files using it, and then publish those up to the Google Play Store. They also have an NDK that you can use if you're using C++, if you're doing anything with gaming, as an example. You may need to be able to do some parts of it in C++, and so they do make that tooling available. But like 99.9% of the Android code you're going to find out there that's native is generally it's using all the standard Android Studio, Kotlin type stuff. There's also this framework called KMP or Kotlin Multi-Platform, and I think they just went 1.0 with it last year, specifically with like iOS. And the idea here is that you can build like an Android app like you're used to, but you can also create a target for iOS, and it will build that same application for iOS. And there's a company here locally, Pacesetter, that I believe is using KMP now to develop their applications. So it's a fairly new technology for iOS, but the idea of what they want to do with this is they want to be able to target like every OS and platform using Kotlin multi-platform. There's also a new one that I just found out about when I was researching this called the Swift SDK for Android. I don't know if you see a pattern there or not, but this is the same idea, is that you build an application for maybe iOS first, and then you can take your application and compile it to run on native code for Android devices. Nowadays, most mobile phones are using an ARM processor, and you can find out more about this on the Swift.org website. or it has an Android working group specifically for doing this. I don't know like if this is like alpha or beta or whatever at this point, but they're essentially trying to do the same thing that KMP has done. KMP is not a Google project for that matter. It's from JetBrains that sponsored that project. So which framework should I use for building my mobile apps, right? Let me take a swig here. So this is an interesting question. And this can be very, very divisive as well, depending on what organization you're in. So the first thing I would when you're trying to make a decision like this, it's like, do you already have like an existing mobile application that you're developing or supporting in your organization, right? And so that's the first question. And if you do, you might have full-time developers there that are supporting that. And if you were to go to them and say, hey, I want to start building with XYZ instead of ABC, it's like they may quit and go to work for a different company. So I went through this this is kind of a common, I think, Silicon Valley type problem. So a lot of these companies like Airbnb is an example. Like Airbnb was like one of the first big companies to like adopt like React Native. And they made the decision, it's like, we're going to start building our mobile apps so they are all React Native. But they already had all of these existing Android and iOS developers that worked there. And so they got a huge pushback from their native developers. And they're like, it's like, this does not do everything that native development does. And there's going to be bugs and things like that show up. And at the time, I think this might have been like around 2017 when they made this decision. There were a lot of bugs in React Native. React Native has gotten to be a lot more stable of a platform. There's still issues, which I'll talk about here in a second. But yeah, it's now there's been a lot of upgrades, a lot of changes have been made to React Native, so it's not the same story. But I'd say if you already have like a lot of native developers that are working for you, building your apps, there's not a big reason to switch to React Native. That being said, one of the things that happened at the company I was working at a couple of years ago was that we bought a company that was doing everything with React Native. And then we made the decision, because we had bought another company that was also doing a lot of mobile development, and they were doing everything natively. And then Bill.com, which is the company I worked for, they were doing everything natively. And so the management of the company said, it's like, well, if 2/3 of our developers are already, doing everything natively anyways, we might as well just do everything natively. And so they went to the company they bought that was Divi, was the name of the company that was doing everything using React Native. They said, we are going to switch all of you over to doing native development. And I was actually surprised. Most of the developers were like, I've got no problem with that. I'd actually, prefer to do it natively, stuff like that. We do have some that were pissed off and left. But for the most part, we did not have a huge number of defections. And I think like nowadays, as an example, like I don't think that you would have a lot of people just quit out of spite, just because it's gotten a lot harder to get these types of jobs. Another question I'd ask, are you a .NET shop? There's a lot of companies here in Jacksonville that do .NET development. And it might be a lot easier to take your C# developers and have them start building a mobile application with Maui than it would be to try to get them to learn Swift or Kotlin, and then a whole new tool set and set of APIs. You still have to know the APIs a little bit because there's things that are specific to iOS and Android, but that might be a good reason to use .NET Maui. Let's say you are a traditional web application developer, development shop, and you have a lot of people on your team that know React, right? Well, that might be a good reason to adopt and use React Native. Maybe you just prefer to build for, bare metal? Would you prefer to do bare metal development? In that case, you're probably better off doing native. But I will say, having done both native development and React Native development, I think what you're going to find is when you are trying to adopt, let's say, a cross-platform framework, you'll be able to develop your iOS and Android applications quicker at the start, and get something that's ready to go up into the stores than if you're trying to do stuff, purely native. But over the long haul, the long term, there's been some studies that have been done by different companies. They found that it actually costs you more in the long run to maintain some of these application frameworks. And I can speak specifically with my experience with React Native. There's things I absolutely love about React Native, mainly that you can build applications in React. The thing I cannot stand about React Native is that it is a brutal, brutal process to keep it maintained and up to date. And the reason why is because both Apple and Google, they make updates to their tooling. A lot of there's changes that are made to, let's say, C++, for example, and React Native uses C++. So a lot of times you'll take like a library that's built into React Native that's a C++ library, and then you'll go to try to compile that. And with the latest set of like Apple tools, and you'll find out that it does not compile anymore. And then another problem that happens is that about every couple of months, they come out with a new version of React Native. And if you do not stay on top of those updates, it becomes increasingly harder to upgrade the app. And so my personal experience, I'd say with the one React Native application I'm working with right now, it takes me probably about a week to do an upgrade, because what will happen is I'll find one thing that does not work anymore, and then I'll have to upgrade that, and then I have to upgrade the whole framework, and then when I upgrade the whole framework, then I have to go through it and use any NPM modules that I've adopted in that are using native code. I have to make sure those are up to date, and then if you're using Expo, there's like a specific version of Expo that you have to use with the specific version of React Native. Am I making sense here about the complexity and stuff? So for me, it is just a pure nightmare to, to keep it maintained and to continue doing the upgrades. It's gotten a lot better and a lot more stable as a framework. And like I said before, I absolutely love React. I love developing for React, but if I was going to start, let's say, a brand new mobile application right now for a company, I personally would prefer just to do it native, because I have a lot less pain when it comes to upgrading to whatever the newest set of tooling is. So that's my personal experience. Okay. Oh, somebody's trying to join. So one bad thing about, one second. There we go. Hi, Matt. All right. So let's come back here. Let's see here. So I have a slide here for doing a demo. I'm going to skip that tonight because I want to give Charlie plenty of time to be able to do his presentation. But before we do that, I was just going to ask, are there any questions? Any questions? All right. Cool. I guess I made myself pretty clear then. All right. So I'm going to hand things over to Charlie here. And Charlie, I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make you the host. All right. And I'm going to stop sharing. No problem.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right, let's see. Share screen, entire screen. All right. Bear with me here while I move things around. Okay. All right. Thank you for having me, David, and for hosting. I didn't have an about me presentation, so I'll quickly talk about what I've done. In the past 15 years, I've been supporting and maintaining Pro applications, web-based Pro applications, and it spans from e-commerce to content management systems and email marketing. Uh, I wanted to try something different, and sometime last year I started picking up Flutter as a way to, try something different. I'd never really developed mobile apps before. So, yeah, I'll start with the introduction here. What is Flutter? Flutter is a framework that allows you to build an app just like the React system to deploy across different devices and platforms. You have Android, you have iOS, you have web, and you have desktop. It was created in 2015 and released sometime in 2017, and it's powered by Dart. Oh, I don't have my camera on. Whoops. Do I need my camera on?
I think you're good.
Okay.
I think everybody can see the screen, so.
Yeah. I'm just trying to take this off. Huh? Yeah. There you go. So, yeah, Dart. What is Dart? Dart was unveiled in a go-to conference in Denmark. The initial thought process was, let's put Dart in a VM inside Google Chrome. Then you had the Canvas API set up around there. A lot of developers were against the idea. They came back, said, okay, we're not doing the VM stuff. Let's just focus on making it compile to JavaScript. That happened around 2015. Then in 2018, they built the type system. And yeah, they added Dart to native functionalities in 2019 and other features for the Dart programming language to help with different, modern patterns that we have to deal with in programming today. Next slide. So outside of Flutter and Dart, you have a package managed system called PubDev. And oh, and in the system, you basically fetch all your Dart packages or Flutter packages, whether it be widgets or libraries that extend the functionality of your apps. You can do it through PubDev. They have a nice section on the bottom of the screen of the web page where they give you YouTube videos of package of the week. And like David mentioned earlier, there is a big focus on AI. There's a package for Flutter called Flutter Gemma, which is their model that they released recently. So I wanted to start off by showing basic widgets, things that you normally would have to use on your app to make it work, to make it start building. You have your app bar, you have your columns, containers, the elevated button to add oh, sorry. To add some kind of sense of touch and feel when you're pressing buttons. Then you have your logo and your icons. and more about the icons in a bit. We have different design systems in Flutter. You have Material, which is the default design system built in Flutter. You can see some examples of the designs that we have. We have like badges, linear progress indicators, things that you would normally see on an Android phone. This is the visual style of Android. One thing to note though, if you are working on a project that has an old version of Flutter, they used an old version of the design system. So there's a migration guide for people who want to, migrate over to the latest version. This is familiar, right? iOS, Cupertino. This design system is available as an option for Flutter developers to build apps with the Cupertino design. Only issue here is if you build an app, like David said, you're gonna have to build one for material design and one for Cupertino, or put some logic in your app to separate the screens with the different themes. But you will have to maintain and keep a list of all the packages that you would use for the design system in your app. Then you have other design systems. You have Mac OS UI for Mac, Fluent UI for Windows, and Yaru for Ubuntu. I'm gonna go over some command features that come with Flutter. I skipped the whole process of the installation and all the different tooling that you would have to install in your app on your desktop or laptop to get started, because I wanted to get to the meat of everything, right? So when you install Flutter, you install Xcode if you're building for iOS, or you're installing Android Studio if you're building for Android phones. Flutter comes with a Flutter command where you can use it as a helper script to build your app, to run it, to analyze the data and code that you have in it, build it, and clean it. And there's a nice feature called Doctor where it gives you an idea of all your tooling and how everything is set up. Here's an example of Flutter Doctor. As you can see, I had to install an updated version of Flutter. Same nightmares. You have to install the Flutter. You have to install all the dependencies, the packages that you have listed in PubSpec, and a little bit about PubSpec in a bit. But here's an idea of what you would get when you run Flutter Doctor. You get an idea of what version of Flutter you have. If you have your Android toolchain set up, you add the verbose B option and you get more details of what might be broken on that toolchain. The same with Xcode. By default, you get Chrome, so you can build automatically for web from the start. If you have devices, like virtualized devices or wired devices connected on your laptop, it'll list those devices and their IDs that you can use to connect and upload a version of your app. All right, here's the fun part. Here I created a CG widgets app that's simple. It creates the project, it creates a base, a number of dependencies, downloads a few packages, and then yeah, you get 131 files for free. There's some more information about the documentation, the API, and it's Google. They want to always give you a YouTube video about something. So you'll have a YouTube video about that. And yeah, from the beginning, you get boilerplate code, and you can go right ahead and do Flutter run afterwards. This is an example of the root directory. You have Android, iOS, Linux, Mac OS, web, and Windows. These are the build directories for everything that you're building for those platforms. Your pub spec YAML is the file that you write up your package dependencies, whether you need a particular version or a range of that version of a package, that goes in that pub spec. And yeah, the meat of the code goes inside the lib directory. Here's an example of the pub spec file that's generated from Flutter. I took out all the comments and the new lines just to give you an example of what you get for free. So here we can see that we have an SDK environment of 3.11. Cupertino icons available for us, 1.08. And in our dev dependencies, we're just basically stating the lint version that we're using. And of course, every Flutter project comes with material designs by default. Which, by the way, you can use material design, develop, and build your apps, whether iOS or Android, with material design. All right, here's an example of your main.dart code. Here you have a basic, what you see in like C, for example, you have your main function. You have to import your material Dart library because that's what you're using by default. And then all you need is a run app with a constant function with whatever the app name is, and it'll run from there. Excuse me. Here's an example of the rest of the code for that main.dart app. In here, I can see that you have what's called stateless widgets and stateful widgets. Stateful widgets are those that require you to maybe store a value somewhere and change it from time to time. So you'll be able to see that value in that stateful widget. Stateless is more like static, data that you want to present and show. We have a title, we have theme information, which is very important. And this actually, the color scheme and theme data changes when you're using the different design systems. So that's one thing you have to maintain and keep a look for. All right. And, just the continuation of this goes up here, and it just basically tells you a little bit more about the application. I wanted to give you guys an example of running it just by default. When you do Flutter run, you get the option of running it for your macOS desktop or your web right from the start. And here I chose to run the app on Chrome. You can see that it downloaded some packages based on what it saw from the pub spec file, and then it moved on to do a loading of the device, in this case, the web browser, to load the application. And just like native, you have hot reload. This is an example of running Flutter devices where you're trying to look at wired or wireless devices. When I mean by wireless, I mean you can set up your phone as a developer phone. And if you're on the same network, it will scan your network to find your wireless device. And it's already set up in Xcode. It will know if your device is ready to be connected to Flutter. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, you have to build the app first. And I guess what it'll do is send the changes from that last push over to your phone. But you need to have it connected for the first part. So here we have Flutter devices. You'll list out devices that you have running in a simulation, like a simulator, sorry, and a virtual machine like Android Studio. in this case, I only have the iPhone mobile virtual device from simulator and Mac OS and Chrome. And you can see here it couldn't find my phone, so there was no way to connect to it. If I run using Flutter run-d device ID, using the device ID from that simulated iPhone, I can run the app, build it, and send it over to that device. Yeah, and this is an example of that. And it would just show up on your mobile phone.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
So, like, if you're reading an app and I have my phone,
yeah.
you're saying that you can just push that app to your phone and you can just try out just on the.
Yes, that's what my understanding is. So the question was, if I'm building an app and I'm building it on my phone, is there an option to send the build wirelessly to my phone? But yes, and the way you do that, you have to enable developer mode on your phone first. Okay.
And one other thing is that if you're doing this on the iPhone and you want to be part of the Apple ecosystem, you do have to have an Apple developer account
Yes.
in order to deploy to the device. If you're just running a simulator, you don't have to have an Apple developer.
Yeah. That's correct. So yes, you need an Apple developer account to be able to deploy to your devices. I think also because you need that sign-in key. You got to set up a sign-in key with the developer account.
You do,
Yeah.
but it's all automated through Apple's tooling.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excuse me. All right, keep going. And here's an example of the same demo app through the iOS simulator. Okay. This particular build uses Xcode to build for iOS, and the device here is simulated using simulator. Here's some example all-in-one deployment tools. I wanted to make sure to bring this up. You know, a lot of us are just trying to figure out how to work with Flutter. You want to deploy, you don't want to go through all the headache of CI/CD. These are some tools that are available for you to do that. Of course, there's still some research and understanding of how these build tools work and how Apple Store and Google Store may, interact and deal with them.
I'll just add to that.
Mhm.
I've used Bitrise before. Specifically, we adopted Bitrise when I was at Bill.com, and they have an excellent set of features and stuff that make it really easy for setting up CI/CD on their environments. No matter what you're using, if you're doing Flutter or React Native or just native, they make it very easy to set that up.
These code magic currently.
Code magic?
App Center code push stuff. Microsoft open source the server in the React Native SDK for code push. Code magic took it. Service around it. You can pay for it if you don't know where you're on. But code magic can also do the over there updates with that.
So we found the code push successor.
I didn't know where it went. I'm glad you let us know about that.
Yeah, code magic.
Okay, good. All right, next slide. I wanted to give you guys the link to the Flutter Dev Install Quick guide. If you want to get started, it's very easy, quick. To go through the documentation and select the platform that you're going to be developing on, and then selecting the target devices that you'll be building your apps on. So it's very easy to go through the Flutter docs and get started. Here's some more documentation. Flutter has a documentation page called Learn Pathways, and it's basically building different kind of like certificate style training where you can go through the training step by step and learn how to build your app, learn how to add features and libraries and other things in your Flutter app. And there's a section there for deployment, CodeMagic, App Circle, and I forgot the other one that I mentioned in the slide. They're all listed there, and they have a few other systems. One that's very popular is called Fastlane. I haven't used it. I've struggled with it, so that's why I suggested the all-in-one package. And yeah, Q&A, contact me, and yeah, I'm available in GitHub. This is my LinkedIn. I'm a full stack web engineer. Uh, Worked most of my life doing Perl, maintaining Perl code, migrating Perl code to other languages, then migrating back to Perl. So yeah, that's been my 15 plus years of web dev. And yeah.
Are you still open for work?
Yes, I am open for work, and lately I've been just writing Flutter code, trying to entice people to use it, and see if they have any like mobile app ideas that they want to bootstrap and start up, you know? Yeah. Other tooling that I didn't mention here in the presentation, you have something called Flutter Flow. It's like I think it's like it's is it like Swift UI? I know no, it's not its own package thing, right? Flutter 4 is like
I think it may even be like a low code
yes,
platform.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. There you go. So it allows you, and even with AI now, allows you to build these different, views on how your screen will look for your app. Yeah. I also wanted to put a plug in here. I know we mentioned the whole Google is laying off engineers, and I think largely because of AI, but they have a conference in Orlando um, that I want to point to um, in July. So they have a conference. They're gonna have the same space as the Android conf folks, I think. Go to that site, flutterconusa.dev, sign up, check it out, see what's up. They're gonna be announcing some Android stuff there, and they'll have Flutter folks there talking about Flutter and AI. Their focus this year is Flutter AI development.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Any questions? That's the gist of it, you know.
I had one, but I forgot what it was. You might have actually answered it already.
Yeah. Um, let's see.
I have a question from
Yeah.
perspective of testing mobile apps. I was part of a mobile development team long time back.
Yeah.
At that time, testing mobile app was very difficult. Like, you tested on emulators, but emulators was not actually like real devices, right?
Yeah.
And we had on real devices with all the different types of Android devices with different operating systems. iPhone did not have that much problem, but I think it will have different operating systems and all. Is that still a problem? Are the emulators now more sophisticated, where anything rely on just one emulator, or you still need the actual physical devices?
So most of my experience has been with doing working with the emulators and stuff that are part of like Android Studio. And I believe that's what you can tie in with the Flutter tools.
Yeah.
But so one of the problems with doing Android development, I'm sure you ran into this, is that there are literally thousands of different devices.
Exactly.
And this is a problem that Apple does not have because they only make a couple of different iPhones, a couple of different iPads. And so inevitably what would happen is you run into a problem where you have a customer or somebody online that reports a bug they found in your app. And then you're just like, it doesn't look anything like that when I run it. The quintessential works on my machine. And it turns out that every Android maker essentially they get a copy of the Android source code, and then they can make whatever modifications they want to the OS when they go to deploy it. It's up to them whether or not they want to push out updates. Like Samsung's famous for not pushing out updates. You got to
Yeah.
buy a new phone. But you run into these problems where you'll go to try to test something. And so what a lot of people will try to do when they're doing their UI testing is that they will set up emulators for like kind of like a certain number of different devices, and they will run automated testing
Yeah.
on all the different tests. So they can go through and take screenshots and see, is this showing up on this phone? Is it not showing up on that phone? That sort of thing, and go through and look at it. There was a tool, I don't know what it's called now, but Microsoft, this was actually part of Xamarin. So
Okay.
Xamarin had a automated testing tool. It was a cloud-based tool where you could take your application and run it on essentially all these different Android devices, on physical devices,
Yeah.
on the cloud. And then Microsoft bought that, and that got made it part of some type of solution that Microsoft had.
Yeah.
I don't know what the status of that is. I think the same part of the company that was handling Code Push also had this service, and I think when they killed the service is when they killed Code Push, and now it's been taken over, thankfully, by another company.
I think Amazon has something similar to that as well. I don't remember the name.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's frankly, it's really handy to have a service like, because that's the standard kind of like Android problem we run into. I was going to note on that, if you are building for Android, one of the things that is nice about Android, this is something where, Apple and Google kind of like are going opposite directions, is that a lot of times when Google is releasing new features for Android, what they will do is they will release that as part of Jetpack. Jetpack is a library that you can include in your application. So when new features come out and somebody's using that Samsung phone that you can't upgrade the operating system on, they can still take advantage of these new features that are available for Android without having to worry if the handset maker has updated their operating system. And on that same note, if you are using, like say, Google Pixel as an example, Google does an excellent job of keeping their phones up to date. So when a new version of Android does come out, generally, if you're on a Pixel, you'll be able to get those updates. And the same thing with Apple. It's like I think they're generally good for about 6 years with updates. And Apple generally makes new features available in the operating system. And one of the things they've been bad about is like when they release, let's say, like a new iPhone, they'll release, some new feature like Swift UI, I believe was one of those where, you kind of had to have like a fairly modern version of the iPhone to start taking advantage of that. And they were bad about making those features backwards compatible for previous versions of the operating system, but they've gotten better. Like they do, generally now, I think for some things they'll go back like 2 different versions on. So
Makes
all right.
sense. Yeah. I dealt with something similar with Android. I'm using an old Motorola phone. And what I found was I needed to wipe out the OS and then start over. So I found Lineage OS as an option. It's up to date and I'm able to develop on my phone for that reason. But yeah, if you have an outdated phone, it's a lot of hassle. And if your app has run in an old phone and it needs to be maintained, that's gonna be problematic.
Yeah.
Question for you. Is there a reason why you started with Flutter and not with Flutter?
So, well, the initial reason why I started with Flutter, because I've been doing Perl for some time. I went to a Perl conference in Virginia, and Randall Schwartz, he's a big Perl developer at that time, back in the days, and he introduced Flutter in that conference that day. So I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. but I never really delved into it. And again, I never really built mobile apps except for mobile web pages. But yeah, that's the reason why I chose Flutter. I wanted something different. I wanted to try something new. Yeah. It works. I mean, right now I have a math application running locally on my phone. I tutor kids part-time, and we have a section called Brain Break. We sit down for 5 minutes and they get to do an activity. I give them math drills with my app so they can go do the math drills, and once they're done, they get a nice, hip hip hooray, you're done, congratulations, and no ads, nothing, just pure, simple, quick. Let them work on math. And I can show you guys later too if you want. Yeah, that's it.
All right,
I guess we're
awesome.
good. Thank you. Thank you
Oh,
guys.
thank you.
All right.
All
I'm not
right.
sure. Do I stop sharing now?
Actually, yeah, if you could switch it back to me, I'm going to say reclaim host. All right.
Oh, you got it?
So
Okay, let
I've
me.
taken over
Yeah.
and I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.